time to Senator Hennessey.
Mr. President, please join me in welcoming several people. Dana Newt. Dana founded the Resilient Buildings Group after 12 years as the Director of Housing Rehabilitation and Energy Conservation for the Community Action Program, Belknap, Merrimack Counties. Prior to his work with the CAPS, he managed and developed large commercial construction projects throughout the Northeast and overseas. I also want you to welcome Berkeley Patino. She's 12 years old, in the 7th grade, and loves outdoor recreation such as skiing and hiking, and her grandparents reside in Whitefield, New Hampshire. Marlena Renton and Ann Dowling. They co-founded Reckless Brewing Company in 2018. Their highly successful business that started in a shed in Bethlehem has grown to $3 million a year company that employs 80 people during the busy months of the year. They've also been instrumental in the development of a popular mountain bike trail system in the North Country known as the Bethlehem Trails Association. Also like you to welcome Joel Bador, Littleton businessman who established Joel Bador and Associates, a regional accounting firm partnering with other local businesses to restore and purchase and operate the Bretton Woods Ski Area, Mount Washington Cog Railway, and the Mount Washington Hotel and Resort. Additionally, Professor Adam Finkel from Dalton, environmental scientist and political appointee at OSHA and the EPA during both the Clinton and G.W. Bush administrations, and also an AMC hut worker at the Lakes of the Clouds from 1984 to 87. And the Reverend Dr. Fred Anderson, pastor and Whitefield resident and president of the Forest Lake Association. And I apologize, I'm sure there's many, many others up there that I've missed, so I thank you all for joining us today.
Further introductions. Senator Gaida.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my pleasure to introduce the 3rd through 6th graders from Piermont Village School in the 2nd Senate District. I am very grateful for the examples that have been provided by my colleagues as to the futures that lie in wait for these young men and women as they develop through their education system. Please welcome them today.
Senator Avard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just happened to look up into the gallery and I see one of my constituents there. She loves the state and she loves her kittens. Welcome, Julie Smith.
Further introductions? Senator Khan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is Trinity Christian School in the house? Okay, well, I have the card. They're here, but apparently not in the room. Well, I hope they come in and we get to honor them sometime during the day. Thank you.
Any further introductions? Okay. Without objection, today's FN report is adopted. Removed from the consent calendar. In Commerce, House Bill 1039. In Education, House Bill 1639. In Energy, House Bill 1299. In Judiciary, House Bill 254. In Judiciary, House Bill 1103. Without objection, the following bill is special ordered to the beginning of the regular calendar. In Energy, House Bill 1454. Without objection, the following bills are special ordered to after the bills that were removed from the consent calendar. In Finance, House Bill 103, House Bill 275, House Bill 1604, and House Bill 1661. In Health, House Bill 1099, House Bill 1455, and House Bill 1606. In Judiciary, House Bill 1178. Senator Bradley moves that the consent calendar with the relevant amendments as printed in the day's calendar be adopted, and that all such bills found ought to pass be ordered to third reading. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The consent calendar is adopted. Senator Susi?
Mr. President.
Senators in recess for 2 minutes. Senate will come out of recess. Senate will be attentive to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, to which was referred House Bill 1454 FN, an act relative to permits for the siting of new landfills. Having considered the same, the committee recommends that the bill is inexpedient to legislate by a vote of 3 to 1. Senator Avard for the committee.
Senator Avard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move HB 1454 inexpedient to legislate. HB 1454 would establish a formula to determine the distance for which a new landfill shall be located from a perennial river, lake, or coastal water. Currently, DES has the authority to prevent a landfill from being sited at a location that they deem could cause surface water impacts. New Hampshire regulation requires that the landfill applicant demonstrate that the proposed landfill is sited in an area where the potentially release of contaminants can be addressed beforehand to prevent impacts to surface water. The Senate and Energy and Natural Resources Committee asks for your support on motion of inexpedient to legislate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Avard. The motion is inexpedient to legislate. Is there any discussion? Senator Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask that the body overturn the motion of inexpedient to legislate so that other potential amendments to the bill can be considered. First, our colleague from District 1 will be the first amendment to be considered if we overturn the inexpedient motion. So I ask for a no vote on inexpedient.
Senator Hennessey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to my colleague from District 3. I ask also that you overturn this ITL motion so that a better motion may come forward, and I look forward to speaking to the bill and to my amendment.
Senator Hennessey. The question is on the adoption of the committee recommendation of inexpedient to legislate on House Bill 1454. You ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Noes have it. Senator Bradley.
I move ought to pass.
Senator Bradley moves ought to pass. The bill is now on second reading. Is there any discussion or amendments? Senator Hennessey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Amendment 1938S.
Senator Hennessey offers floor amendment 1938S and may speak to her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. What a better way to celebrate New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Drinking Water Week and our New Hampshire professionals and partner organizations who work to ensure we have safe drinking water in New Hampshire than to look at the legislation and pass it. And that legislation is HB 1454. Our state has paid hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars cleaning up and mitigating the impacts of PFAS contamination in communities like Merrimack. Later today, we'll take up HB 1547 and vote to spend 25 million more in order to get triple that from the federal government. Imagine if we had the opportunity years ago to put in place safeguards necessary to prevent these contaminants from entering our groundwater before they happened. That is what is at stake today, especially for towns like Littleton, Lisbon, Whitefield, Woodsville, and hundreds of private wells in Dalton, all of whom rely on safe drinking water from Forest Lake and the Ammonoosuc River. A modern landfill can produce several billion gallons of toxic leachate during its decades of operation and after, enough liquid to fill every public swimming pool in the entire United States. The scientific community unanimously agrees that landfills will eventually leak. Yes, they are more reliable than they used to be, but all landfills will fail, and many have histories of above-ground spills, accidents, or flooding. Just last year, one of our state's modern landfills in Bethlehem had a significant spill that the modern spill mitigation technology failed, and thus failed to detect and prevent this spill. When chemical and other pollutants leak from a landfill, they contaminate the groundwater, which then flows away from the site. In appropriate locations where the soil is large and made of clay and the bedrock is solid, groundwater can move away as slowly as 1 foot per year. In inappropriate locations where the soil is made up of sand and gravel or bedrock that's fractured, groundwater can move as quickly as 20 feet per day. DES has never been required to consider whether a proposed landfill site polluted groundwater will trickle away towards lakes, rivers, and wells, or whether it will hurtle towards them at high velocities. In 1991, New Hampshire established a one-size-fits-all 200 feet setback between new landfills and major surface water bodies. Unfortunately, landfill operators only have to test the groundwater at their boundary once every 4 to 12 months, allowing for a plume of contamination to travel this distance in as little as 2 weeks. HB 1454 replaces this one-size-fits-all 200-foot setback with a site-specific time-to-travel setback that many states use and that the federal EPA has recommended for more than 30 years. I'm sure all you remember HB 177 from last year and the hundreds, if not thousands, of emails we received on the two-mile setback. 14 of this body voted against the legislation, and many of those 14 asked me to come back with a scientific approach to determine what a safe setback is. After months of work with legislators, residents, and scientific experts, HB 1454 is what you asked me to come back with, and I was happy to work with Representative Tucker on this legislation. It asks DES to establish this site-specific setback distance on any proposed new landfill from any perennial river, lake, or coastal water. The goal of the setback distance is to be sufficient enough to prevent contaminated groundwater from reaching these bodies. The goal of the setback distance is to be sufficient enough to prevent contaminated groundwater from reaching these water bodies. That's the goal. They calculate this by having an independent hydrologist do a routine on-site field test of the speed in which groundwater moves in any given direction, aka the seepage velocity. They then take this number and multiply by 5 to see how long it would take this potential contaminated water to move in 5 years. Why 5 years? Because there needs to be enough time to realize there was a leak to begin with and then to mitigate the effects of the spill. States across the country have offered a range of years. New Jersey has 5 to 12 years, Maine has 6. If this bill passes with my amendment or no amendment, New Hampshire would still have some of the most lenient requirements in our area. For the 5-year calculation, the hydrology tests are the same tests that would be done during the application process anyways. Instead, it would be required right away and with additional seepage velocity calculation so that the state and developers can know they are in an appropriate location. This due diligence upfront will save the applicant and the state time and money. Testing the soil on the first day is akin to ensuring you do not place a fireworks factory next to a match factory. This legislation does not affect the expansion of landfills who have already gone through the full approval process. This legislation does not ban new landfills. This legislation does not ban new landfills. In fact, multiple landfills that are currently sited in our state would have passed this very test. The landfill in Success that is in my district recently performed this test and reported to DES that any undetected leak at their location would be 60 to 150 years away from the nearby Androscoggin River. Let me repeat that this bill does not ban landfills. Let me also address the misinformation around landfill capacity in our state. In March, Director Wimsatt testified that there has been a narrative that there is always a solid waste capacity crisis. This is because DES posts diagrams that show the current permitted capacity when it ceases. This tends to show a drop-off that people refer to as the cliff that seems to point to a looming crisis in our state. In reality, the permits are done in phases, and applicants will apply for another permit, which expands the time until this metaphorical cliff is met. That was a quote. He went on to say that he does not view the situation as a crisis. In April, New Hampshire DES did just this and authorized the expansion of Mount Carberry in Success until at least 2041. There was no capacity crisis in March, and the state just added capacity in April. The real crisis is our negligence in not requiring a simple and inexpensive test that could haunt the state for generations to come. By the way, this test in Maine, they charge $582 for it. Please join me in voting down the, we've already done that, sorry. Please join me in passing my amendment, which I'm going to speak to, and this bill. This is a very, very small step in the state that we can take to ensure our new landfills are sited in a place that will not affect the drinking water or our granite staters. We need to prevent contamination and not put our granite staters' health at risk and spend uncalculable funds to clean up contamination. I know, Mr. President, you work on these funds all the time, hundreds of millions of dollars. How much more are we going to spend? The amendment responds to requests from the industry to incorporate the offset concepts used in Maine's time of travel setback. It allows for a landfill to be sited closer than 5 years' time from surface water if the operator adds specific engineering or safeguards that go beyond the requirements for landfill design that we currently have. This incentivizes operators to embrace technology and better landfill design in order to be sited as little as 2 years away from surface water. In support of this amendment is the Conservation Law Foundation, the Sierra Club, Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests, and NCAB. Please join me in recognizing this is a very, very small step the state can take to ensure any new landfill are sited in place that will not affect the drinking water out of granite staters. We need to prevent contamination and not put our granite staters' health at risk and spend uncalculable funds to clean up contamination. And Mr. President and colleagues, please join me in celebrating Drinking Water Week. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hennessey. Senators, if you have any concerns about whether or not there's an amendment in your packet, please just stand up and address the president. We have a lot of movement going on in the room right now, and I think it's causing a little bit of confusion up here with us as to where we're going with things, because we want to make sure you have what you need to be able to vote. So if you don't have an amendment or there's a concern about something, we can always recess so that we can get it straightened out. So thank you. Further discussion? You're speaking to Amendment 1938. Senator Gregg?
Thank you, Mr. President. If the senators have your copy of 1938, I'll be referring to several of the lines in there. You may want to follow along. Line 3, the department shall establish the site-specific. That's important as we go down through the rest of this particular bill. But then when we get down into lines 8 through and probably down to around 11, it talks about the applicant doing certain things. And the applicant has to hire a hydrologist, which I have no problem with, and providing certain information. But that information in 1, 2, and 3, in lines 8 through 16, are things that already are required in New Hampshire state law when someone submits an application. They have to do the hydrology report. They have to do a geological report. They have to do other things. And if you go to the rules for citing this, and I think it's like 804, I didn't bring all of the references with me because I didn't know how the senator from District 1 was going to speak about this. Lines 17, all right, and it's important through 17 through 19, no permit shall be issued by any division of the department for siting a new landfill that fails to conform with the setback distance calculated using the method set forth in paragraph A. Well, we heard testimony that we're going to give allowances. Well, that allowance information is down in lines 20 through to 28. So this would at least, if we're going to have allowances, you'd at least need an amendment to say as modified by paragraph D. But when we get down into D, on lines 25, it talks about additional years of setback. And then line 28, 3 additional years. So the way I read this, just taking it, we've got 5 already. If I'm doing additional years, it's 8 years now. And that's 8 years because I did something to improve it. Again, the way this amendment is written right now does not support what the senator from District 1 is trying to accomplish, and would need severe revisions to get it to there. And I believe that there's other amendments that I will speak about once they're presented if this amendment fails. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gray. Senator Sherman. Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, just to respond to that, I do not believe the 5-year distance of travel is in current statute, just to clarify prior comments. I'm speaking as someone who has been working in the area of landfills, not really voluntarily, but since 2014, when we first identified a cancer cluster in my neighborhood. I think we really should take a lesson from Coakley. The Coakley landfill sits on the highest point of the seacoast. It's mostly gravel, has some bedrock. It is capped but not lined, and it was a gravel pit. The PFAS, 1,4-dioxane, and other contaminants that are emanating from Coakley right now are contaminating the Little River watershed, the Berries Brook watershed, and flowing into Bailey's Brook. It's a Superfund site. Were we warned? We were warned. In the early 1970s, a hydrogeologist warned DES, I have a copy of the letter, that this will have a direct impact on drinking water in the area and it could be dire. They went ahead anyway. As part of the Superfund back then, the way they did it, the remedy was a cap. It's an impressive cap. People who lived in the area at the time talked about all the dump trucks that were coming and going and cleaning that up. But it's only a cap. Modern landfills, like the ones that we see going in Rochester and other places, are lined both on the sides and bottom as well as on the top. At Coakley, we've learned that a component of the PFAS leaching from the landfill is actually coming from the cap. They sampled the cap. The cap is impregnated with PFAS. So, lesson number 1, don't site a landfill in the wrong place. Lesson number 2, we can't trust the integrity of either the landfill's lining or even the liner itself, that it won't be leaching contaminants. So what about a setback? What is the most important, or one of the most important things that we preserve in New Hampshire? That's our environment. That is the beauty of the North Country and everywhere around the state. I've been all over the state recently, and it's breathtaking. This is one of the most beautiful states I've ever lived in, if not the most beautiful, and we have to be good stewards of that. So the sole purpose of a setback between new landfills and surface water, no matter where they are in the state, is whether that setback is given in units of distance or of time, is to protect the water. I've served under the Senate President on the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund for the last several years as Vice Chair. I am more knowledgeable about drinking water than I ever thought I'd dream to be. But the sole purpose is to protect that water from the inevitable leaks and oft experienced spills. The EPA has been recommending for more than 3 decades that states use one-time setbacks, they use time-based setbacks over the distance-based ones. They're more flexible.
we currently have a distance-based one. The testing is based on groundwater movement, which mostly depends on the type of soil around the landfill. Some soils like gravel allow more rapid flow than soils like clay, as the senator from District 1 spoke. It is essential that we know how fast groundwater flows in order to know how much time will be needed for an appropriate response if a leak or a contaminant is detected. That response is the remedy. In the case of my neighborhood, that response is a super fun cleanup. But we knew before, we knew ahead of time that this shouldn't happen. The more years, this is one of the things that I found very confusing until this was explained to me by multiple hydrogeologists. Years are not random. The more years that are allowed in statute, the more certain you can be that there will be enough time to stop the leak and remove the contaminant before it has a chance to reach the body or source of water you want to protect. Average migration time across the country can vary from 3 years to 28 years. The average is 8 years. Maine uses 6. Vermont, Massachusetts don't allow new landfills. Neighboring states, and this amendment actually picks one of the most lenient times, which is 5 years, and then allows for you to subtract if the person putting in the landfill is really putting in something that will mitigate the flow. The reasonable protection of our pristine watersheds afforded by this amendment will set a measurable, attainable, and standard metric for future expansion or siting of landfills in New Hampshire. This is not about one landfill. This is about making sure we learn from the past and we're as smart as we possibly can moving forward with as much flexibility as we can possibly give to the developers. So I hope you'll pass this amendment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Senator Sherman. The discussion is on Floor Amendment 1938. Senator Hennessey.
Just want to respond to some comments that were made about the amendment. Lines 8 through 19 are not in current law. This is the section that calculates the rate of flow of groundwater, setting it to a minimum of 5 years. And Section D does not add time to that. It adds specifically in line 25, adds the time to the calculated travel time. So if you have an application and you've done the test, which is inexpensive again, and it says any leak is going to take 4 years to get to a body of water where it could potentially pollute it. And DES has said, if you add an additional liner or do these other mitigating steps, you can add 1 year back or 2 years back or 3 years back. That is what the time is calculated to. So if they say you can add 2 years back to that travel time and you initially calculated at 4 years, then now you have a 6-year travel time and your landfill is legal if it passes all the other DES stuff. So this is a simple calculation, a simple amendment that will keep New Hampshire's drinking water safe. I hope that you will pass this, and please know that if you are thinking about voting for any additional amendment and not voting for this amendment, I fully believe that despite the good intentions and undoubtedly a lot of work, any additional amendment that is proposed today that you may find in your packet accomplishes nothing and is worse for our state and pushes our states and regulations back many years. It replaces a bill that has a simple premise that there are some places in our state simply not suitable for landfills and places it 5 to 10 years worth of things for DES to potentially consider during hypothetical rulemaking. We work closely, the sponsors and the scientists that worked on this bill and residents, with DES and changed the initial draft of 1454 to produce a bill DES said would not require any costly rulemaking. The amendment I am proposing will require some rulemaking, but not much. The other amendment before you today will require significant, timely, costly rulemaking. It adds dilution to factors that supposedly protect people, in essence saying, we put a lot of PFAS into the groundwater, but there's a lot of groundwater between here and the lake. The most fatal flaw is something that surely must be a drafting error. The amendment attempts to have DES put forward a setback, not in statute, but in rulemaking. But even so, the setback is completely subjective and not based on science. It says that the setback should be 1.5 times greater than the time it takes to stop the contaminant plume from reaching a river or lake. Well, if you haven't had contamination yet, how will you know how long it's going to take to clean up that contamination? Look at the Valdez oil spill. Could you ever have imagined that spill happening? If anyone even did imagine that, could they ever imagine the time and money and effort and devastation on our environment that happened? You do not know how long in advance a contamination will take to clean up. That's why, friends, I hope that you will pass this amendment before you today. Do not consider any other amendments. This is the best future for New Hampshire. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Hennessey. Senator Carson.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President. We've had testimony about an amendment that hasn't even been introduced to the body. So I don't know what is going on here.
Senator Carson, floor amendment 1938 was introduced about a half an hour ago.
When? I'm sorry, as an
Senator
amendment?
Hennessey introduced the amendment.
Well, I've been sitting here, I didn't see it. Thank you.
It's in the packet, though. We're not handing them out. So. Further discussion on floor amendment 1938. Roll call has been requested by Senator Hennessey, seconded by Senator Gaida. You're voting on floor amendment 1938. You ready for the question? The clerk will call the roll.
Senator Hennessey.
Yes.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Bradley.
No.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Prentice.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
No.
Senator French.
Yes.
Senator Ward.
Yes.
Senator Ricciardi.
Yes.
Senator Khan.
Yes.
Senator Daniels.
Yes.
Senator Avard.
No.
Senator Rosenwald.
Yes.
Senator Carson.
No.
Senator Whitley.
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh.
No.
Senator Reagan.
No.
Senator Susie.
No.
Senator Birdsell.
No.
Senator D'Alessandro.
No.
Senator Perkins Quokka.
Yes.
Senator Gannon.
Yes.
Senator Sherman.
Yes.
Senator Morse.
No. Floor amendment is adopted 14 to 10. The bill is still on second reading and open for further discussion and amendments. Motion is to table. Okay. Roll call has been requested on the tabling motion. Parliamentary inquiry.
President, if I know that we just passed an excellent amendment for the safe drinking water of our state, would I vote no on this tabling amendment so that we can pass this bill as amended and do the right thing for New Hampshire? Thank you, Mr. President.
Seconded on the roll call by Senator Bradley. The clerk will call the roll on the tabling motion.
Senator Hennessey.
No.
Senator Gaida.
No.
Senator Bradley.
No.
Senator Waters.
No.
Senator Prentice.
No.
Senator Gray.
No.
Senator French.
No.
Senator Ward,
No.
Senator Ricciardi,
No.
Senator Khan,
No.
Senator Daniels.
No.
Senator Avar,
Yes.
Senator Rosenwald,
No.
Senator Carson,
Yes.
Senator Whitley,
No.
Senator Kavanaugh,
No.
Senator Reagan,
No.
Senator Susie,
No.
Senator Birdsell,
Yes.
Senator D'Alessandro,
No.
Senator Perkins Quokka,
No.
Senator Gannon,
No.
Senator Sherman,
No.
Senator Morse.
No. Tabling motion is defeated 3-21. The bill is still on second reading and open for further discussion and amendments. The question is the adoption of ought to pass as amended on House Bill 1454. Roll call is requested by Senator Hennessey, seconded by Senator Bradley. State your inquiry, Senator Susie?
If we take this vote now on the ought to pass as amended, does that mean that no further amendments could be considered?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You ready for the roll call? Senators in recess. The Senate will come out of recess. Senator Guida for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask my colleagues to join me in welcoming the 3rd through 6th graders from the Piermont Village School. And the town of Piermont, bounded in part by the Connecticut River and Lake Tarleton, in light of our previous discussion. Thank you, Mr. President.
A roll call has been requested by Senator Hennessey and Senator Bradley. Any further discussion? Senator Perkins Coco.
Us freshmen, we're tough ones. Thank you, colleagues. So I think a lot of us know that this bill has been the subject of a lot of discussion. It's been the subject of a lot of debate. There have been things that have occurred inside the State House to support clean drinking water. There have been things that have occurred outside the State House that don't support any of our goals. And so we find ourselves here today, having passed this floor amendment that was offered. We hope that this is an advancement on drinking water. We hope that this is a protection for our state. But we, under no circumstances, and I hope that everyone stands with me on this, condone some of the advocacy behavior that occurred around this bill. And I know that we all have friends and allies that advocated for this bill, and we know that there are others that advocated on this bill. So I just want to make sure that that's stated. Again, we all share the goal of protecting New Hampshire's environment. It's a wonderful place. I grew up here in these mountains. And how we do that and how we decide to pass rules and legislation around that is something we can debate here in a civil manner, and that's our job. So I just wanted to state that today. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Avon.
I rise up again against this bill, and I don't like the way the process happened. I feel like this, we had another amendment. My name's on it. Nobody talked about it. But with regards to this bill, having been the chair of Energy and listening to the discussion over 177 and over now, I just want you to understand that there is a lifespan to our current landfills. We heard testimony that Bethlehem had issues and that there were leaks. I believe Sunapee puts their trash in Bethlehem. Bethlehem has a lifespan, and eventually it will close, which means Sunapee may have to ship their garbage all the way to Keystone, Rochester, which means the lifespan of that particular landfill has now going to be diminished. There is an application. There was testimony saying that this does not target one landfill, but I beg to differ. I beg to differ. There's one in Dalton that is being proposed, and there is an application for Dalton. This is Seabrook all over again. Not in my backyard. That's what we're saying. So Dalton can send their garbage out of their town, but don't you dare put in our town. What we're seeing right now is, again, the rug being pulled out from people that put in an application. They put in a fee for a hydrologist, engineering. They go through DES and through the process, but somebody gonna move the goalpost because they don't want it in their backyard. That's what's going on right now. I don't care where this landfill goes. I care about the process. And when we pull the rug out from somebody that wants to do business in the state of New Hampshire because we don't want it in our backyard, and you can pull on the heartstrings, wonderful, but nobody is going to do business in the state of New Hampshire if this bill gets passed. Nobody. Guess what else is on the line? Part of the application is the possibly $100 million recycling plant. Heck, let's not get a recycling plant, let's put it in the ground, because who knows? We're only gonna save the landfills that we already have right now. Why do we need a recycling plant? It's part of the application, but that goes away. And so does the hope of New Hampshire dealing with it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not gonna stop the people from out of state putting their garbage in our towns. This isn't going to do that. What is this gonna do? It's gonna say, New Hampshire, are you kidding? They are so fickle. They're so fickle. We can't do business in there. If this passes, I hope the governor vetoes it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Avon. Any further discussion? Senator Susi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to echo some of the comments made by my colleague in District 21, but also my colleague in District 12. I'm serving in my 10th year in this body, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for my colleagues. But I have to say, the process surrounding this bill and its predecessor, the worst I've ever seen, the worst I've ever experienced. This legislation purports to be about protecting the environment, about protecting health, but it's got the most toxic atmosphere that has ever existed around a piece of legislation. Mr. President, I want to be clear today with each and every one of you. The vote I cast today, whether for or against, and you'll find out when the roll call is called, has nothing to do with the fact that I was bullied, that I was threatened, that I've been insulted, that so many of my colleagues have as well around this issue. I'll cast my vote and I'll do what I think is right, but be clear, everyone that's surrounding this issue. This has probably been the worst process ever seen, and you have put people in an uncompromised position. So just want to make that statement and be clear. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, Senator Susi. Senator Hennessey. Any further discussion? Senator Bradley.
I'm going to vote in favor of the amended version of the bill. I think some of us tried to find a compromise. Let's hope for the best with the amended version of the bill. And I just want to second the words of my friend from Manchester, my friend from Portsmouth, and my friend from Nashua about the process. Let's pass this bill and let's hope for the best. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Carson.
Mr. President, I rise to speak against this bill, and I would like to echo the comments of my colleague from District 19. I am extremely concerned about this process. And also my colleague from District 12. We all know what this is about. This is not about all the landfills. This is targeted to one landfill. And let's be very, very clear about this. We all support clean drinking water in our state. Mr. President, you and a number of senators in here have worked tirelessly for hours and days upon days, ensuring that the people of New Hampshire have clean drinking water. But I can't support this because of the process. And now, after listening to the debate here today, I understand why the committee, the majority of the committee, ruled inexpedient to legislate. This is not ready to come forward. This is not ready to come forward. And I am concerned, Mr. President, if we put this into statute, we are going to be doing more harm to our state and to our citizens than we can even think about. So thank you very much, Mr. President.
Further discussion? Seeing none, you ready for the roll call? The clerk will call the roll on ought to pass as amended on House Bill 1454.
Senator Hennessey.
Yes.
Senator Gaida.
Yes.
Senator Bradley.
Yes.
Senator Waters.
Yes.
Senator Prentice.
Yes.
Senator Gray.
No.
Senator French.
No.
Senator Ward,
No.
Senator Rishardi,
Yes.
Senator Khan,
Yes.
Senator Daniels,
Yes.
Senator Avard,
No.
Senator Rosenwald,
Yes.
Senator Carson,
No.
Senator Whitley,
Yes.
Senator Kavanaugh,
No.
Senator Reagan,
Yes.
Senator Susie,
Yes.
Senator Birdsell,
No.
Senator D'Alessandro,
Yes.
Senator Perkins Quokka,
Yes.
Senator Gannon,
Yes.
Senator Sherman,
Yes.
Senator Morse.
No. The ayes have it, 16-8 is ordered to third. The motion is adopted and it's ordered to third reading.
A big victory for people in the North Country trying to block a landfill from being put next to a state park in Dalton. A bipartisan majority approved legislation yesterday that would require a site-specific evaluation for putting a landfill near a river, lake, or coastline that would replace the current one-size-fits-all 200-foot setback. This will likely sink a years-long effort to build a landfill near the Forest Lake State Park in Dalton.
The goal of the setback distance is to be sufficient enough to prevent contaminated groundwater from reaching these water bodies.
We're thrilled. We're thrilled. I mean, the senators really thought their way through it. They pulled together. This was a nonpartisan bill in the first place.
In a statement, Governor Sununu suggested he may want changes to the bill in order to sign it, saying this legislation in its current form would result in property tax increases for virtually every family in New Hampshire, and that gives me great pause.